Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Virgin Stars Podcast, fourth season. And my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. It's an amazing episode because Geoffrey Thorne is back to talk the newest issues of X-Force. Now, come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Thorne. Thank you for coming back to the Virgin Stars Podcast.
No problem. No problem. My pleasure.
It's always great when someone comes back, when they say they're going to come back. So you said it, and now here we are.
I always tell the truth.
It's always greatly appreciated on my end. So, come on. This is the second time we talked about X-Force, so it's great to talk about that once more. So you completed the first arc of the X-Force. So how does that feeling?
I had a good time. I don't know why I ate that Starburst while we're talking, but um, yeah, I mean, I had a really good time with it. There are some things that happen when you're doing, in terms of your plans and your outlines. Sometimes things get switched around, or they have to be omitted because there's not enough space. But I'd say we got about 90% of what we wanted done in the first five issues got done. So on to the next. It was really a lot of laying of the groundwork. What is the team dynamic? We reiterated over the first three issues, here's what they're doing, here's why they're doing it. And then I think everyone thought we were going to do, every issue is going to be a one and done, but we only did that for two issues. And then as of three, it was a three-parter, culminating with stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm thrilled that Marcus is drawing like a maniac, and it's just good. I don't know it's difficult. I don't have no notes. No notes. So
So interesting. You said you are 90% where you thought you were going to be. So let's talk about that 10%. So what had changed from where you originally envisioned, and what part did you may have let cut loose on the way to your end game?
at the beginning, they did that QR code thing with the sort of post credits extra scene, um, which sort of showed this murky, who is this person watching the proceedings. I would have liked, in retrospect, to maybe do one or two more scenes like that with the person watching the thing, watching their activities. But then I remembered, from the time they get to Tokyo to the end of the fifth issue, that's about 3.5 days. Right? So whatever the time scales that are going on in the other X books, when you're reading X-Force, they're moving fast. Like, there's a long gap between the first part of issue one and the middle part of issue one. That takes many weeks. But the from the time they hit the ground in Tokyo to the end of issue five, that's multiple days at most. There's no long gaps. Like, they're just running. So as a result, it was difficult to have points to be able to tell all of that stuff and break away to show the person observing. That had to go, basically. That was unnecessary extra page count that just wasn't helping anything. Um, Trying to think what else. Um, I don't know. I had toyed with a notion where Deadpool would come back for 5 seconds and do something stupid to Forge because he's mad at Forge. But then I remembered he's going to be there for 3 days while that thing's digesting him. So theoretically, while all this is going on, Deadpool is still in Tokyo being swallowed by that monster.
Wait, are we hypothetically going to have Deadpool crapped out by this monster?
Listen, I reserve the right to bring Deadpool back as needed, but just understand, Deadpool and Forge are no longer in any way friends after that. So if he comes back, when he comes back, it won't be like, "Okay, it's forgiven. Thanks for the money." That's not what. No, not that.
But like
That
I said,
relationship is dead.
the suggestion is if he's still being digested, I mean, he is actually being digested. He is going to be crapped
It's
out.
trying to digest him and having a hard time. He's giving this thing massive indigestion, lethal indigestion.
It
So,
bothers him that you put this much thought into the torture of digestion for Deadpool. I think it's
you know,
bothersome.
I think a little Deadpool goes a long, 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 long way. So, um, others may differ, and I certainly enjoy the movies, but those are, let's say the movie is a 2.5 hour. Actually, that's too long, frankly, but um, that's a one bite, and then you can forget about it for a couple of years. That's about as much Deadpool as I need for a year. So, um, so anyway, yeah. So other than that, I can't think of anything. It was really, I had to remind myself a lot because I'm reading and how either I'm reading or I'm aware of what's going on in the other books well before, obviously, the public finds out. And there was a certain amount of conversation about coordination. And I kept having to remind myself and sometimes the others, guys, some of your books take place over long periods of time. And mine only takes place in this first 5 issues takes place in a few days. So until we get to the end of issue 5, there's a very small window which you could have a bite at the apple because once he forms a team and invokes the team, theoretically, they're just off doing their lives until that Tokyo mission. He's like, I want you in the team. Great, we're on the team. Then nothing happens until Tokyo. So, but other than that, I think we did. I'm very happy to that I hope that Marcus is having fun. Um, he's got a lot to draw. This is a really weird book in the sense of you kind of don't know what venue you're going to be in from book to book because they're just running so fast. Um, Uh, I can't think of anything else we really missed. So that 10% is just sort of maybe stylistic things and things I would have liked, maybe in retrospect, I would have liked to do. I think after we had already gone to press, and I didn't know we'd actually gone to press, I might have put instead of the hard choice in Surge's the last thing she said, after we'd already gone to press, I thought maybe she should say Krakoa, but it was too late. So, wah, wah, wah. But yeah, I'm happy with it. I think the audience is happy with it. So
Well, one important question is because right now you've held it for memory goes for over for 5 issues now at the very least. Tank. We still don't know what's going on with Tank. It's been 5 issues. When is that gonna drop? When are you gonna tell us who Tank
I
is?
mean, listen, I told everybody at the beginning that Tank's identity will be revealed when editorial wants it revealed. So I keep Tank going for 5 years if I want to. But obviously Tom and Mark are not going to let that happen. So I would say sooner rather than later, you will get the answer to the Tank mystery. Um, they've already released at least one cover where we see one of the potential Tank identities shows up. So
Really?
yeah, there's a cover where Forge and Tank are fighting Colossus, and a lot of people were saying Tank is Colossus, and I'm like, I don't know how that's possible if Forge and Tank are fighting Colossus. So, you know, but the mystery will deepen in the sense that um, even though within the story the characters are sort of settled into everyone has secrets and it's none of our business, we're not here for that, right? So if Tank wants to keep whatever Tank's secrets are, Forge trusts Tank, Sage trusts Forge. So I don't necessarily like either one of them, but I like her. So, and we're doing the thing that we set out to do. So, um, there's not a lot of pressing of Tank as to Tank's identity, but from the audience point of view, oh, we're very much aware creatively that you guys are all out here speculating who and or what Tank might be. I have read a great many of the possibles. The one person I will give away right now, just for the fun of your show, is Tank is not the Tank from the Ironheart. Tank is not that Tank. That guy is still bouncing around between the two. The way they left him is the way he is right now. Whatever happened to that guy, that this is not that dude. So that's a scoop.
Big.
That's a scoop. He's definitely not that guy. But beyond that, you're just gonna have to wait and see.
Now, for those who are obviously speculating and observing closely the 5 issues, have you dropped the hints yet of who Tank is that can be pulled apart if we're paying close enough attention?
That's an interesting question because I think when you read comics, you kind of get an inkling of what kind of comics the writer likes. Just in the same way, visually, you can sort of see the influences of a given artist sometimes. Like not always, but sometimes you can go, oh, clearly they liked Kirby, or clearly
Hmm.
they like Neil Adams or whatever. I think you can tell what kind of comics I like from the way that I write comics. So the short answer is, yeah, there are clues, but they're the kind of clues that I'd pick up on. They might be too subtle for the average reader. And that's not necessarily unintentional. I mean, I don't want you guys getting too far out ahead of me, but yeah, there are definitely things, and there will be more things dropped. The problem for the audience is, am I putting this thing in as a clue, or am I putting this in to screw with your head?
Now, when you get to the eventual reveal of Tank, and so I'm obviously gonna poke at you a little bit on this, is this gonna be like, hey, that's who Tank really is, or is it gonna be like, this is a major shakeup in the X-Force world when it finally is revealed who Tank is?
Well, as you've noticed in the book, it's a lot of fighting. It's very, very, very action heavy. So there hasn't been a lot of time for people to sit around and discuss much of anything, right? As I say, everybody's got their stuff going on. They're not necessarily communicating all their stuff to each other. We had the conversation between Rachel and Betsy about, is Tank even a human being? Um, we can't tell, right? Which is not the same as no, he's not. It's we can't tell. We don't know, right? So we're gonna let this ride. The Tank reveal will be a dramatic moment. Um, I don't know that the way that I have the reveal planned, and that's really a matter for editorial to decide when it occurs. But the way I have that moment planned, they're gonna have a lot of other things going on when that happens. So um will they be able to stop and talk about it? Be in the aftermath of whatever the next big thing is. But during, I don't know that it will. Will it be a bigger shakeup than Sage quitting or Surge dying? Probably not. But for the audience, a lot of people are going to be like, "What?" And a lot of people are going to be like, what? So, um, which is what would have happened anyway.
Now,
So,
again, for those trying to suss this out, right? So you're gonna answer this one more question from this.
okay,
Is it gonna be one of those situations like, you know how Wolverine is on the Avengers, Wolverine's on the X-Men, Wolverine's on like 1,000 teams, and it's like, hey, Wolverine's just everywhere, don't worry about it, it just is.
it's not Wolverine.
The thing is Wolverine, but is it one of those things where whoever is Tank can also be it still is also a character somewhere else, and it just so happens that it's being used here and somewhere else at the same time, or is this character not being used anywhere else, and this is Tank in X Force?
I think theoretically, if one of the other, remember the time period that's taking place, this is very fast. So I'm not going to say this has occurred, but there's no reason that the person that is being tanked, that Tank, if Tank is an established character, there's no reason that character has not appeared elsewhere,
Okay.
right? Because it's such a compressed time period, even though it's taken 5 issues to get through it, that, and also between, there's a gap between 5 and 6 of many, many days. They're not running and gunning as hard. So um theoretically, if this character was an established character, yes, that character could appear in one or more of the other books a la Wolverine. But um it is entirely possible because there's a lot of, I hate to be like this, by the way. I'm not trying to be clever. Um, it is entirely possible simply because of the number of mutants that have not, they're not accounted for. They didn't disappear with Krakoa, and we haven't seen them again. We don't know where they are. They're just in limbo somewhere. I mean, creative limbo somewhere. Um, it could be any one of the appropriate sort of muscly characters, or a character who can simulate all those things.
Well, okay. Answer that. I'm gonna poke it one more time. We're gonna poke one more time at this. Given that as we saw it in X Force 5, so especially the team behind you, where you kind of have the alternate universe Avengers, is this a 616 character that's Tank, or is this another version of Tank from another?
Tank is definitely from this world.
Okay.
Tank is absolutely 100% from this world. Um, one of the things that's of interest to me, the Nuklo arc, the Nuklo mini arc, that's one particular fracture event, right? And it has to do with portals opening to all these alternate dimensions. But that's not what X-Force's mission is. That's just one fracture. It's just a really big fracture, right? So um I'm not it's not exiles. We're not backdooring ourselves into exiles with this. Um their next set of missions will have absolutely nothing to do with any of that. Like that's done. So the next five issues are definitely way weirder than this, which was part of the point of the book. Like even in its initial pitch, it was meant to be more of a weird world travelogue of the 616 situation, which is where all the annotations would come from and references to issues back as far back as the 1950s or 60s, certainly into the 80s and 90s. Um, and occasionally even direct references to the Krakoa era, which everyone seems to think we all hate, and or alternatively are secretly trying to keep going. It's neither. It's just Krakoa occurred, and therefore it's part of the canon. That's as much attention as Krakoa is getting from, right? So
Well, let's dive into the another character that's a very important part of the arc, recent arc is Nuklo. Okay, now Nuklo was kind of the primary antagonist for 3, 4, and 5, issue 3, 4, and 5.
yes,
Um, how much information are we going to get to how that happened? Because Nuklo,
quite a bit. You're about to learn quite a bit. This next arc, the tone and pace of the next arc is completely different than what you've just seen. One of the things that some people have twigged to, and not everybody seems to have gotten, is there are people who are like, Nuklo's the villain. And I'm like, is he? I sort of set him up as the victim. He's somebody's weapon. Somebody weaponized Nuklo. I don't know that Nuklo's like that was a tragic moment both for Surge and Nuklo. Like, it's not like we wanted him to go out that way. That's the only way we could get rid of him. And someone theoretically, like, this is what I mean about the kind of comics I like to read. You go into the temple, you get introduced to sacred geometry, you get introduced to all these portals. You've met Nuklo. Every time Nuklo vanishes, the same set of symbols appear in front of him. Right? Now, the people who are observing them, they think they know what the symbols mean, but they have no idea if Nuklo's doing them himself or if there's an outside agency assisting Nuklo. The characters in the book don't know. Now, theoretically, the audience could start putting these clues together. Now, it isn't a fair play mystery in the sense that there's no way you could figure out who is behind Nuklo because the clues won't add up to anyone you already know. So, but within the story, they're starting to piece together that this, like for instance, when they're inside Nuklo's mind and they get to the core of his being and he's a child, but there's this weird symbol over his head, and then right, and you're not allowed to look anymore, right? Um, they're chasing Nuclear around. Also, the three Nuklos, that's not something I made up. That's his part of his power set. But he acts like a kaiju almost. He only has one word. He can only say one word, and he's roaring. Um, we've said in the story that he had the mental capacity of a person his proper age, and yet here he is acting like when he was first introduced, where he is essentially mentally stunted, right? Somebody did this to him. Might even, I mean, that might be a phrase like, did somebody do this to him, right? So implication is going to be very strong that you're about to meet the person who is behind Luke Nuklo, the person or persons, I should say. Yeah.
like, there's no way in the world, because Nuklo, I mean, he's a powerhouse, obviously. He's super powerful. There's no way in hell he's a schemer. He doesn't have the mental capacity
No,
to be a
he's an
schemer.
event. Like
Right.
he had no agenda except to go and activate these portals and link them together. That's it. Like, and by agenda, I mean he wasn't even fighting anyone. All that damage was caused by people trying to stop Nuklo. Nuklo didn't, until X-Force attacked him, he didn't attack anyone.
Hmm.
He just walked through their city and their buildings and their cars and whatever, right? So, I mean, and we got to do some fun things like remind people that all over the earth there are lots of people who have personal dimensional portals, right? Reed Richards has in his house a personal dimensional portal. I don't know how New York zoned him for that, but you know, obviously Doctor Doom has multiple of those. But we also introduced the Chinese government has one. The Russians have the Russian Gate, which is a nod to Stargate SG-1, which is one of my favorite shows, and there
Same
actually
here.
is a
Same here.
Russian Gate. Um, Copyright be damned. Uh, but so those are the kind of weird little sort of side Chotsky things. What do you call them? Easter eggs that are peppered throughout these stories. Um, and I want to keep it wild. I want to keep it weird, and I want to keep it wild. We spent the first 5 issues establishing weirdness with Betsy and Rachel. What's going on with both of their powers? Something. None of my business yet. Who is Tank? Clearly, Forge knows who Tank is. Why doesn't Sage know? Did he tell her? Does Sage know? I don't think so, because if she did, theoretically, Betsy and Rachel would already know who Tank is.
Hmm.
So we can guess that Sage does not know, right? This is not that kind of team where they're all collegial, let's go have a beer together. Ford put them together to solve a particular set of problems. They agreed because of this. And theoretically, once those problems are solved, they split up again. They don't, it's not like, X-Force for life. It's not that kind of team. So this next run will show you what kind of team they can be. And the thing with Surge was she was the only person on the team who'd never killed anyone. All the other members of the team have killed people in cold blood, like coldly killed people, not just like, oh, in the heat of battle, someone accidentally died. No, like I came here to kill you and now you're dead. All of them have done that. So Surge was the only one who hadn't. And now she also has.
That by intent then? Force
Um,
a team of people who are killers?
it wasn't in the sense that I didn't go, oh, let's have a discussion about who's a killer and who's not a killer. It was Forge knows a group of kinds of people. And frankly, whether we all like it or not, over the last 20 years or so, most of the X-Men are murderers, which is not something that necessarily sits well with me as a fan personally. I like my heroes to be freaking heroic personally, but um to have a person in the group who has never had to make that choice is a kind of friction that I think is good in this kind of adventure fiction, to have a person who is like, but we're superheroes, and the others don't say anything. Like, I don't know who told you that. When it's not on my shirt, you know,
Hmm.
like that. And not that big a deal, not like it was in Blood Syndicate. In Blood Syndicate, they were very clearly, look, idiots, we're not superheroes. When we're done with you, you're dead. We solve problems one way. That was the Blood Syndicate. This isn't like that. They want to be heroic, but they're all big picture type of heroes. They'll let the building burn down if it stops Hiroshima, right? Sorry about everybody in that building, but if that's what it took to stop the entire city being vaporized, sorry about it. We'll come back and help with the cleanup, you
Well,
know.
the thing about the analog, right? The
Yes.
analog brought Forge to Nuklo, obviously for reasons. Why or will the analog then bring Forge to that person who then controlled Nuklo because they are just as then dangerous, aren't they?
Yes. And that is the thing about the analog. Part of the reason it's weird. I don't like talking back to people who write reviews because although I read some of them randomly, it's just whatever that day or not. But there are people who seem to be the opinion that I don't know what's going on, or that the analog is undefined in some way. But if you read the book, Forge himself is like, this thing is doing stuff. And I'm like, and he's like, hmm, I don't understand these readings,
Yeah.
and it's because the analog itself is confused, right? Its whole thing is it's monitoring these nexus. Not okay. Nexus means many things. This is not a dimensional nexus. These points where all of these factors come together to create a potentially world-ending
Right.
event, right? Sometimes there are so many variables that the analog itself is like, and we saw one where it wasn't incomplete. Yes, the fracture point is here, but this itself alone is not the world-ending event yet. So theoretically, had you stopped Nuklo at stage one, yes, this would have sealed the fracture, but you did not. He went to Florida. You could also stop him here. If you stop him here, then it stops, right? And as you saw at the very end, when it's like you screwed up on strike two, X-Force, the analog was glowing hugely bright and made this gigantic symbol, and Forge is like, oh, right? Because that was it. One more shot at this apple, right? The analog is not intelligent. It's simply, if it is intelligent, is a rudimentary intelligence in that I'm supposed to collect these data points. There are so many data points that could be the thing. I'm not programmed to answer this question. Forge, that's on you. Right. So, yes, the analog will continue to be a thing. It is Forge's experience this time around has sort of made him question how much his power set is interacting with the analog. Like you and I could not get anything out of the analog. It's just a weird ball with dots flashing on it, right? Sage is sort of figuring out now, after applying her massive intellect to it, she is sort of figuring out how to decode the analog, right? But Forge's powers interact with the analog. It's not his brain that's doing it. Like there's this weird, and if I do anything with this book, and I don't know that I will achieve it because it's such a action-oriented book, Forge is not a genius that way. I keep trying to explain this to people. They've turned him into sort of, well, he's our Tony Stark. No, he's not. Tony Stark is a really, really smart human being. He's a ridiculously intelligent human being. He has no superpowers. He is not a mutant. He's just one of those Leonardo da Vinci's that shows up every once in a while and can do stuff. Okay. Forge doesn't have that. Forge has a mutant ability to make machines that solve problems because he wants to have that be the machine. That's a power. So the machine does what he built it to do. And in this case, he built it to interact with his superpower, but he might not have the concepts in his head to decipher what he needs to do to repair it. He might need to build another machine to repair the analog. He himself might not be able to do it. Right now, seems like a subtle distinction, but it's not. That's why Sage is so fun interacting with Forge, because she's all brains and no training. Right? She can sort of figure it out based on access to all these concepts, but she's never actually built anything. Right? So it's not that it's theoretical, it's that there's a huge difference between applied and theoretical. Right? A lot of in applied engineering, applied physics, there's a lot of trial and error that it should work this way, but it turned out it didn't. Why? So Sage has to cross that gap every time with Forge's devices. She has to go, okay, seems like I get it. Okay, yeah, fine, fine. What? No, that can't possibly work. Let me access the Shiar database that I can somehow get access. You know what I mean? So that's why I think they're a fun duo, because they both have gaps that the other complements, and they also have areas that the other one can't see into.
Oh.
So so yes, the analog is going to be more prominent, certainly. Forge's relationship to it is going to be more of a thing, but also I keep trying to stave off these rumors. The analog is not a bad guy. It's not secretly Nimrod. He did not build a Sentinel. It is not Cerebro. It is exactly what I said it does. It does exactly what I said it does and no more. So, because it's a Forge machine, right? He says it in the, what do you call it, in the final issue of 5. He says, X-Force is a machine I built to stop Armageddons. We just stopped an Armageddon. Ta-da! Like, that's what I do. So, anyway.
So one of the themes that we do have in issue 5 and throughout is the idea of death. How is death going to be shaping the future of X-Force?
Um, okay. I don't know what Hickman's original plan with that whole resurrection protocol thing was. Personally, taking death off the table takes all the drama out of a action adventure story from my point of view. Unless the story is about immortality itself, the nature of immortality, okay, then I can dive into a volcano and burn to death because I know I'll be right back, and so does the audience. Eh, it kind of works in the movies because you're sort of going, yeah, James is not going to die in the next James Bond movie. Of course not. But we know that. We're not here to see the potential death of James Bond. We watch all the people around him potentially die, and that's where all the pathos comes from, right? But for this, and I've said this before, people were mad at me about wiping out all the Green Lanterns off camera, like they each deserve their own heroic death. And I was like, no, that's the point. They're essentially a paramilitary organization, and you're lying if you can say, oh, I know every name of every dead soldier in World War II or Vietnam or Korea or Afghanistan. You're a liar. Not even the federal government, the people whose job is to track that, could tell you on the spot every single name. Okay. Because that's the nature of putting on a uniform. Death has to be one of the possible outcomes, or you don't have tension. And especially in comic books where Storm's not going to die, guys, right? Captain America, no matter what you do, no matter what it seems like, he's not a member of Hydra, never was going to be. He's Captain America, right? So with these things that suck the tension, suck the potential risk out of a thing, you have to inject more and more stuff in. So from my point of view, with death back on the table, let's make a point. These are high stakes situations. We are playing with forces beyond our ken, often fighting well above, punching well above our weight class in many situations. One of the greatest examples of this goes back to when Galactus first shows up in the Fantastic Four. They got their butts kicked. They had nothing. They had nothing. If the Watcher had not helped them, that's it for Earth. We lost. Okay. And even after everything, the only way they beat Galactus was to take something from Galactus's house and say, we will blow up the universe unless you leave us alone. And Galactus's response is like, are you insane? That's why it has that. Right. Well, we are aimed with the ultimate weapon. Leave us alone. Right. That only works because the only alternative was the end of everything, right? If you don't have that on the table, then why am I reading the comic book? So unless you're talking about these other things, if you're talking about, oh, we're going to be alive forever, and what does that do to a person's soul, and what kind of a monster will you be in 100 years after all your other friends have died? Yeah, there's a story in that. I ain't trying to tell it, but for superhero comics, things need to be immediate. Things need to be right there on the table. You need to be on the bleeding edge, or why am I here? Basically, why did I spend my $4, $5, $6? Too much money to read this book that supposedly shows the adventures of people who solve problems basically with their fists. Like, there's not a problem in comic books that can't be solved ultimately by beating up whoever's causing the problem. Right. So if it's that sort of a tactile, physical, visceral adventure setting, then death has to be on the table, or there's literally no point to me being here. Me as a fan, me, Jeff, as a fan. I'm like, okay, well, it's not like I want to see him die. I'm not a big fan of those characters that murder people all the time. I don't love that. But if there's no potential negative outcome for the hero, what's the point? You know? Um, and nobody stays dead forever. Nobody. Bucky is here. You know who stayed dead forever? Uncle Ben so far, and both of the Waynes. Although apparently in the new what is it? Not All In, whatever their version of the Ultimate
Oh,
is,
it's like absolute. I think
Absolute,
absolute better.
Martha's still alive, right? So, you know, like nobody stays dead in comics. So like let's not light our hair on fire right away, you know. Um but yeah, so death is definitely on the table. That's a high risk situation. Emotional betrayal is on the like what does it mean to be a hero? How far will you go to save the world essentially? Um all of those things are in play at all times. And yeah, when you read a Jeff Thorne comic book, no matter what else anybody else is doing, if I kill somebody, they're dead. Okay. What did I say in Green Lantern? Oh, if they got killed by some esoteric weird thing, then there's a loophole, right? If you got shot by a Doctor Doom device and your body dissolved or something, okay, fine. It really sent you to the negative zone or shot you back in time or some crap, whatever, if we want the character back. But you have to work for it essentially to get them back. But if you got chopped in the face with an axe and we saw it split your skull, you're dead. You're just dead, like normal dead, you know. Um, and some people don't like that, and I don't care. So I'm like, okay, well, tough for you.
Well, one interesting thing though is that death in so the X Force. I think you have a really good line in X Force, or you quote a very good line, which is everyone's a plan to get punched in the face from like
Yeah, it's a paraphrase of the real Mike Tyson line was actually more complex, more nuanced, but that's the real that's the gist of it.
so. I kind of have a vision. Every team, every hero thinks I think on some level that they're immortal. We're gonna win the day. We're gonna survive. And every so often, a team has to see that moment where a teammate dies and now goes, shit, this stuff is real. This danger is real. What do we get ourselves into? How much of Nori's death is a wake up call to the team to say, this just isn't a game anymore? Or
Well,
this
here's
is
the interesting thing to me about that. There's been a lot of commentary about how much we're all paying attention to Krakoa and how much the sort of shadow of Krakoa has fallen on the various books. And whether it be positive or negative, that commentary seems to fall into the camp of, let's say, NYX, it's just more Krakoa, right? Or it's not Krakoa enough. I see what they're doing, but it's not enough of Krakoa. If we are going to do this, why did we get rid of Krakoa? Right? Or if we're going to do this, you haven't killed Krakoa enough,
yeah.
right? Whatever, right? And each one of it's literally from the ashes has meaning to all of us who are making these books. Each one of these sets of characters, or sometimes the individual characters, is still dealing with the fallout of the loss of Krakoa. Krakoa went to the White Hot Room and took a whole bunch of folks with it. So that's a fail because that was not the goal of Krakoa. That's a
Hmm.
fail. Okay. So for our guys, again, X Force is composed of mutants who have murdered people and not felt one way or the other about it. Forge in specific was a soldier, not just I'm one of Xavier's frontline troops or whatever. He's literally in the American military, right? He went to the Sion Kong War, the Vietnam of the Marvel Universe. Like he saw his entire patrol die. He's killed bunches of people with his hands. Okay. Both Rachel and Betsy have murdered people. Now they were the bad guys, but they killed them. Sage, God knows what Sage has been up to. Okay, like my version of Sage is like Black Widow on steroids. Like the Sage that I have in my head, her Red Ledger is like volume 8 of a Red Ledger. Okay. But with that in mind, there's a line in the MCU sequences which is Captain America meets Tony Stark and has nothing but disdain for him. And he's like, you're a lightweight, you're a dilettante. I'm the guy who would throw myself on the grenade. How do we know? Because the audience witnessed him with no powers throw himself on a grenade, right? And Tony's counter is, well, I would like to think I would cut the wire. And Bob was like, yeah, fuck you.
Yeah.
No, that's not what we're saying. You don't get to change the rules, Captain Kirk. It's these, like, sometimes it's just throw yourself on a grenade. So all of the members of X-Force are also that person,
Hmm.
right? When they join the team, they're not dilettantes. These are people who throw themselves into the volcano if that's what's required to save the world. That's why Forge chose them. All of these people are the ones who will take a bullet to save the world. They will literally die to save the world. And we know that, at least in a couple of cases, they've done so. And before there was resurrection, right? Or in Rachel's case, she didn't know she was going to get killed. Charlie shot her in the back because he's a dick. But um, they've all killed and they've all died to save the greater good. Um, they don't need the lesson so much as they need the reminder of why. So in the fullness of this story, if I were to get to the one thing I never count on is I'm going to get to the very end of the thing I'm trying to do because God knows, right? It's all, are enough people buying it? Does editorial want to keep going with whatever the hell I want to do? We are a, what do you call it? A minor, we're a second tier X book. We are not X-Men. So if one or more of the X-Men books wants to go left, but we were going to go right, well, that's tough for us. So we got to sort of go along with that because they're the tip of the spear. But if this book's about anything, it is this sort of like, I don't know how to say this properly. I liked a great deal of the Krakoa era, and I didn't like a great deal of the Krakoa era, but that's true of every era, right? So I'm not making some giant freaking political statement that's anti-Krakoa era, so don't jump on my head about it, idiots. Okay. But if we're going to take the Krakoa era as written, as canon, that means a whole lot of people made a very, very large choice about being part of that nation. And some of those choices were pretty raw. Some of the things they did were pretty raw, right? Much more towards the villain side of things in traditional superhero comics. Now, they had in their minds, a clean agenda that they were serving, but they did some dastardly crap, all of them. Okay. That to me is not super heroic, especially now that the deck's been reshuffled back to a more normal status quo. So how does that person fit back into the world? Right? How does that individual go, okay, maybe we were a little compromised here. Maybe I went too far there. Or maybe I didn't, and screw you for saying so. Right? Like they don't all have the same viewpoint coming out of this. That would be ridiculous. Right? Um, But if we're going to explore anything in this book, it will be, that's what I'm saying about the shadow of Krakoa is in our book too. It's just less visible. It's less overt than it is in some of the other books. We don't stand around talking about Krakoa very much, right? But people are like, why is their character like this? Why is their character like that? And I'm like, did you not see all that crap that was going on for the last 5 years? Were you not paying any attention to that? Like, that's going to change people. Like, that's going to put you through it, right? So they've all been through it. This is the PTSD book from my point of view. And I always draw people's attention back to how did we find Sage at the beginning? She was in a mental institution. She could not process what had just happened. Her giant mutant brain could not process it. Did we fail? Were we the villains? Were we the heroes? You know, did we win? What did we change? Nothing. Then why did we do all that? All of that. And even with her giant brain, it was too big a problem for her to solve. She could not. And it put her into this weird fugue state. Right. I mean, these are things that are obvious to me, but might be too subtle for some of the people in the audience. And how does she get snapped out of it? Ford shows her the most complex object on Earth that he just built, the analog. She goes, oh, complexity. Zoink. I'm out of my fugue state. Right. Um, so yeah, so the loss of Surge is not a wake-up call in that sense, but there's not going to be that person standing next to them going, we should be superheroes either. There's no little, there's no naive voice saying, but superheroes, guys, superheroes. It's like, well, heroes maybe. I don't know how super we are. There's no argument. We're just on mission. And you saw it broke Surge. I mean, it broke Sage. Sage, possibly the least emotional member of the group, was like, yeah, nope. No, 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 no. Right. I'm done with this. Like, which she was done when we met her at the beginning. She was already done. So yeah, going forward, there will be a ripple effect. There is a ripple effect from the loss of Surge. There is a ripple effect from Sage quitting the team. Um, these are not accidents. No one is flailing. We are going in a specific direction to a particular place. Will we get there? That's all due to sales. Like, and as I did with Green Lantern, as I am still doing with Green Lantern, if we somehow magically don't make it, I will post the annotations and tell you where we were going. Right. And then you go, and then you'll find out what you missed, and you should have been buying the book. So buy the book. So I don't have to do all that because I am lazy. Um, so yeah. So Surge's death takes away their conscience. If they had any, also it explodes the notion of, oh, she's going to be the conscience of the group. No, she's not, because we killed her. Sorry,
Yeah.
you know, um, we're not doing that.
Well, one thing is that there's a speech that Forge gives to Nori before it all happens, or about you know that she kind of repeats at the moment when she does her final act. Now, knowing Forge, did he know his speech was going to head in a certain direction? Was there an intention behind it? And because he did give it, does he feel more guilt because he kind of sort of gave the little nugget that
These
let.
are questions that you should ask going into issue 6.
Okay.
Every question you just asked, you should be asking going into issue 6. I don't want to say spoilers, but I will say that Forge keeps reminding people his powers do not work the way some people seem to think they do. He's not precognitive. He cannot see the actual future. He can only build a machine that works the way he wants it to. Why did he allow Nori to join the team? He did not recruit her. She showed up and he was like, oh, you're on the team. Why did he do that? Because she was apparently necessary to the machine, right? And I think that's as far as it goes. And that's something Forge is going to have to wrestle with too. Like, just like Cyclops has to wear, well, he got brain damage, so his powers aren't working properly, but he has to wear goggles or glasses or something to keep from murdering people with his just looking at them. Forge is going to have to come to grips with like this, everything's a machine and a problem to solve. That might not be the best way to go through life.
Hmm.
Just like Sage is going to have to go, okay, yeah, I can figure everything out, but maybe there's a more of a heart component that I am not really factoring in, right? All of them have things to get over. And in large measure, that is, we went really far. We went right over the line. We obliterated the line with Krakoa. We obliterated there. If there were ever a line, we said, screw that. Nope, we're doing this. Tough, right? And it didn't work. Whatever people felt about Krakoa were in the audience were, well, it could have gone for another 5 years. Well, it was the only creative decision that has ever been made in like whatever. Okay. It's gone. Ergo, it failed. At least in world, inside the story, there's no way you don't think it failed because it ain't here no more. So that's going to weigh on you and it's going to make you make different life decisions. What kind of hero are you going to be a hero? What does that even mean? Do we have things to atone for? I don't know. As the writer, I don't know. I don't know how they all feel about it yet, but it might be a good idea to think that maybe I came up with a group of people to oppose them who have already made that decision. Maybe we haven't met those folks yet.
Now, X Force has now lost two members, Nori and Sage. Sage quit. Nori's obviously dead. So Forge is two people short. Um, or because it's not six is not out yet. Are we only two characters short? Is anyone else going to follow the lead of Sage because now she's out? And is there a gap now that you're going to be filling going forward?
Uh, okay. One answer to that is spoilers.
Okay.
Okay. Two, that's part of the next section of the story.
Okay.
Um, they are going to go on without those two characters, right? Forge is still on mission. Um, when I pitched it to those guys and they accepted it, yes, theoretically, given it in the fullness of time, Forge will recruit any mutant or any person as needed to solve a given problem. It's just, how fast are we moving? What is the problem? So I definitely, the next 5 issues are a gear shift from what you've been seeing. So many of the questions that you're asking are exactly what I want you to be asking. And about 75% of them will get a direct answer
Okay.
in the next 5 issues.
Now another group that you introduced as well that for Impact, just looking behind it, you have the Avengers from the other dimension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now most of them died. The Thor from that dimension is still hanging around. I
Okay.
mean, I know the portal is technically brought back, but he's still not dead.
They all went back to their dimension except for Tempest and the Iron Knight. They
Okay.
got killed. Uh, I mean, partly that was just a plot device because the running thing of well, wait, finish. Ask the question.
So my question is, I mean, like I said, obviously the Thor from the world does go back because you did say at the end of issue 5 that that every portal is closing, everyone's going back, but he's still around, and usually, is how much that just a thing that you just have left out there? Is this now a character that can come in and out of?
Well, okay, that's fascinating to me. All right, so back in I'm going to say 1993 in New Warriors, there was I think it was New Warriors 11. The character called the Sphinx, who is not to be confused with another character called the Sphinx, who was her husband. The original Sphinx had been killed, and this was the grieving widow of the Sphinx, who is now also the Sphinx. She created an alternate, not an alternate reality. She did essentially a magic spell and reshaped the 616 reality. Okay. And in that reality, Egypt was in charge of the world instead of Europe, right? Instead of Rome, we had an Egyptian empire, right? And that permeated all aspects of conquest and exploration and colonization, and all of that was permeated by that civilization rather than by Rome and Europe, which led to a version of these Avengers. Now, some people are like, oh, it's those Avengers again, but it couldn't be because those Avengers went away when the spell was dropped, which it was dropped at the end of that arc, which was 2 issues, I think, back then. So these are not those guys, but I loved those guys. I thought it was a cool idea. Um, Years later, Kurt Busiek established that, I think it was in Avengers Forever, that somewhere in the multiverse, these guys exist, right? The guys that had been shown in that previous issue, except those guys were never an alternate timeline. They were a magic spell being imposed on 616, right? Kind of like what you got the Spellmaster was trying to do in issue 2 of X-Force, except the Sphinx was successful. Um, so these guys went back home. I specifically put in lines to say these are not them. The name of their planet, that their Earth is called Keb. They are not ruled by the Sphinx. They're ruled by a god empress called Ishtar, who may or may not be the goddess Ishtar. Okay. That original story, Storm, was called Storm. Um, this one is called Tempest. Her name is not Aurora. It's too funny. There is no Black Panther. Fenris is from Norland, which is that reality's version of Wakanda, because in their reality, Wakanda was never hidden. It's just part of the empire, right? So their version is a whole bunch of Nordic, it's a Nordic version of Wakanda in their reality, a hidden society based on Norse mythology, right? So that's Fenris. Um, Iron Knight is a Brit, a white guy named Sir James Rhodes, who's the Iron Knight. So these are not those guys. I like them. Seems like people like the visual. I like the original guys. I wanted to give them I like the original guys so much that I wanted to give them a rock solid foothold in the 616 reality as an alt. So yeah, they're out there. People can use them. Horus, Captain Assyria, whoever else is on. There were a couple characters I didn't get to use because there was just not enough space. There was a Chinese version of the Vision called Spectral, who we did not put in. And what was the other one? I think it was Ant-Man. I can't remember. But the point is, they just went back home and they lost 2 members here. So what do they feel about it? I'm sure Horus is not particularly happy about it. And also we established that their world's version of Forge uh, left Tempest with a child who is now motherless and fatherless back in that other dimension. So I don't know, but it doesn't sound like a good thing for Forge, at least. That you know, We went on a field trip. Mom died, and it might be because your missing dad was responsible. I don't know. You know. So yeah, sometimes you just throw things out to put them out in the world so that others can use them if they want. And I hit up Fabian to tell him, look, as a writer of comics, sometimes we feel, this is disposable literature. Not like people collect them because we're all maniacs, but they're not meant for that, right? It's disposable. You're supposed to read it for a month, have a little good bit of fun, and then toss them. Like the fact that we have thousands in our basements means we're freaks. Not That's not what they're designed for. So, so you can sometimes feel like you're spitting in the wind, so to speak. Like I'm trying to write something fun and maybe meaningful to some people, and there's a little morality play in here and all of that. And is any of it landing? And I wasn't a kid, but I was in my 20s, I think, when this thing came out, and it impacted me. And I was like, the Assyrian Avengers need to exist. They need to physically, really, actually exist. So let's do that. And I let him know that affected me, that affected me as a reader, and it stuck hard enough for this to happen. So, for what it's worth, I hope other people pick these guys up and do something with them. We took their version of Storm off the table because we already got one. We don't need like 9,000 storms running around. Um, and I like Fenris very much. There's always this joke, but there's all these, well, I would call it a joke. There's a whole bunch of these racist types. They're like, well, if you're going to race swap people, then why can't you race swap the Black Panther? Well, I just did. His name's Fenris. Now what? So, um, anyway, so that's all it is. It was just fun. It was just fun. It could have been I could have made up any alternative Avengers. It could have been an alternative X-Force. It could have been a mirror X-Force. Like, I just wanted to use those guys.
Now, it's listed for issue 6. It's the
Mhm.
show Ford Fighting Storm. So is that directly connected to what's happening in the alt storm that this leads, or is this a
Spoilers,
separate thing?
spoilers,
All right, all right.
spoilers, spoilers. Well, okay. Remember, this book started out as a Forge story with guest stars when I first pitched it. So whatever you're seeing, always remember that it's largely filtered through whatever Forge's experience is and after Forge Sage. These are always my primaries. So even though it's X-Force, that core is still there.
So, yeah, obviously, we have a whole arc looking forward. So, what can the listeners look forward to in the upcoming arc?
New characters, um, a much clearer idea of what the hell's going on as the team starts to really get what's going on. Um, there's emotional fallout from the loss of Surge. Um, you're going to find out what the hell's going on with Rachel and Betsy. Clearly, it ain't what you think. Um, and we're going to get a new big bad. Um, we're going to get an interesting big bad, an interesting big bad. Like there's a Darth Vader and there's an Emperor. We're going to get both of them in this next bit.
Like I said, I really enjoy what you've done with X Force. So, how far along have you written for it and have planned for, and we can guarantee?
Well, I've planned for our initial conversations were, and this is okay. Again, when I was on Green Lantern, I planned for 3 years. And when we talked about it, I was like, I'm going to do this in year one. This is year two. This is year three. And all the people I dealt with were like, cool, bet, go do your thing, have a ball. We're with you. And we only got to do the first third. And in that case, it wasn't due to sales. It was due to changes in editorial direction, editorial vision for the full line. Um, Contract was up at the time and they were going to go left, and I didn't want to go that direction. Ergo, everything had to stop and they're going to go over here. No worries, all good. But that's always true of every comic. So I planned this all the way out for, I would say conservatively 15 issues, but it could go, this particular arc could go as, everything's in sequences of five because five is what makes trade paperback. So chapter one is 5 issues, chapter two, and so on and so on. So I kind of plotted this out for 3 chapters. Um, uh, and then after that, it would be a massive gear shift, so massive that it might require me to leave this book and go do another book with some of the same characters. But that's editorial saying yes to certain things, which they have absolutely not said yes to. I have a pitch out there for a couple of an ongoing X-Force book, or if this is my swan song at the end of this big thing I'm trying to do, then I would move over here and continue over there. But that's next year, the end of next year at the earliest. So I think 3 chapters generally, a beginning, middle, and end chapter, right, is what you kind of want. But it's all sales. It's all like, and I don't know it's funny, some of my peers know I knew what my sales were on Green Lantern because I had a special secret way of finding that out. But in this particular instance, I don't have that. And so I know whatever the editors tell me or don't tell me. And for the most part, they don't tell you. Now, some big time writers, maybe they get that data, but I ain't on that list. So as far as I can tell, we're doing pretty well. But I think we talked about this the last time. If it turns out that my name on a book only nets you 30 to 40,000 readers and what you want is 60, it's not a failure, but it's not what we wanted. So I don't know. I just don't know. And I gotta pretend like it's a success or I can't write. So I planned 3 5-issue arcs to begin, and then a massive gear shift for another 3 5-issue arcs. And that's all. The second 3 arcs are, hey guys, what if I did this? Here's what I'd like to do after this thing's done. And that, by the way, there was the vampire crossover we weren't part of because that was already ongoing when I got assigned this, where we got to do this. The Doom takes over the world. We're not part of that, right? But there are other crossovers upcoming that we are part of, and every time there's a crossover, it sort of pushes you don't know when it's coming because again, that's dictated by the big books. Not like there's no crossover that's going to be generated in X-Force. It's only going to come out of X-Men, one of the X-Men titles, right? So when they say, "Hey, we're going to do this," you're involved. Like, well, we actually got shrunk down to the microverse. I don't know how we could be involved in your big battle with the Brotherhood because we're in the microverse right now. Like, figure it out, Jeff. You're involved. So that can mess up or put a bump in your road. But yeah, I would say I basically mapped out the first 15 issues, and we're 2/3 of the way through that in terms of where I am writing wise. So we shall see.
So the spinoff that you're working on, I assume it's the Deadpool spinoff. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, well, once you work with Deadpool, you can never go back. Is what really you gotta keep working the pool in. No, I just the thing about these characters is, and why I keep choosing these kinds of characters is that, especially like with Sage, with Surge, um, they've been around a long time, but in Surge's case, nobody really did much with her. And in Sage's case, everybody did everything with her and none of it really added. Like, okay, so all right. But if you ask anyone who is Sage, no one can tell you, right? So that gives me a lot of freedom as a writer to really just sort of dig in. Same with Forge. All he got turned into was like, well, he's the tech guy. He's our Tony Stark, but he's not Tony Stark. He's not Tony Stark. He can't be, or it's not a superpower. I'm going to say that even if they ever kick me off the book and I never write Forge again, it's not a superpower if he's just smart.
Yeah.
I'm smart. It ain't no superpower.
Well, I mean, it's a fair argument. I mean, at what point is being smart then a mutant power? I mean, if Stark is so smart, then isn't he at some
And he's a
point
mutant.
at that point? I mean, he's mutant smart. Isn't that the whole
Right.
point?
What you would want ideally, and I'll never do this because I don't know, I can't think of what the circumstances would be. What you would want is for Tony Stark to bang up against a Forge device and go, what the actual hell is how why would okay, everyone leave. I'm taking this thing apart because it shouldn't work.
Yeah.
right? Can you tell me? No, I cannot tell you. Do you have any design schematics? What does that mean? What are those? I don't know what that is. Forge, you built this. I did at my lab at my house. Where are the design specs? I again, you keep saying this phrase. I don't know what that means.
Right.
Like, he can't teach anyone how to do it any more than Jean Grey can teach you how to be a telepath,
Ooh.
right? And until people really lock down on that, Forge is never going to get to be a real character, a real player, because he isn't just that guy. He solves problems by making a machine that solves problems, that solves that problem. That's great. Do that, you know? Um, I love Forge. I'm like, if they took X-Force away from me, I would still beg to, can I still have Forge? Can I just have, we just call him Mr. X and have me tell my Forge stories? I would be so happy. Anyway, yeah. So I have a lot of plans. They know my plans as usual. The book seems like it's toddling along at the right level. It doesn't have to do the numbers of an X-Men book. Has none of those characters in it, which is both good and bad, in terms of a draw, right? Like if you're only showing up for Storm and Storm's never in the book, you
Right.
know. But that's not my problem. I pitched them the stories I wanted to tell, and they said, yeah, go tell those stories. So I'm happy. Um, Marcus stepped out for 2 issues. He had a like a wedding or something, so he had to go deal with that. Jim Toe came in. He's great. It's a very nice switch up in terms of what happens in the next 2 issues. It's good. If we were going to have a guest artist, these are the exact right issues for him to he or she to be that guest artist, because when Marcus comes back, it's back on mission essentially. So um it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Well, like I said, I really love having you on the show. When would be the next great time to bring you back on the show for X Force? Like, is there a point where sort of like issue 5, that's the natural? Um,
Well, this thing breaks in issues. This thing breaks up in 5 issue bites. So I'm going to leave that one to you because several things happen in, okay, in issue 6. it- I don't want to give any spoilers. I want everyone to want to read the books. A lot of emotional crap happens, and there's a big revelation in issue 6. But issues 7 through 10, in each issue, you're going to get a big slap of change. Like, what? You know, so at any point, you can decide this is the point.
all
Because,
right.
right, it's especially around issue. I can't spoil that. No, can't spoil that.
Okay.
Spoil it. I'm just going to say people are saying how closely knit together are these books. We're all aware of what everybody else is doing. Let's just put it like that.
Well, it is appreciated. And like I said, you'll hear from me again. I want to thank you again so much.
Anytime you want, brother. Anytime you want. I
Have a good
love this
night.
crap. All right.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the First Stars podcast. Please like and subscribe. Turn for the next episode when Elliot Kalin boards the mothership to talk Harley Quinn from DC Comics. Their next voyage, travel on.